Greetings. In recent years, we have witnessed an extraordinary surge in the volume and legitimacy of information relating to UAP, once upon a time known as UFOs. This was a subject not long ago. It was relegated to the fringes of anything that we can imagine, all parts of culture, and it has now erupted into mainstream consciousness with unprecedented force, I would say. We've had congressional hearings, Pentagon reports, military whistleblowers, and so much more. It's the sheer magnitude of these developments has created a kind of information tsunami that even the most dedicated researchers are struggling to navigate, or at least I will speak for myself in that regard. I think never before have we seen such a convergence of official acknowledgement and public curiosity and fascination about this subject. So it's a flood of information that's exhilarating and a little daunting because as the stigma is gradually eroding, bit by bit, we're finding ourselves at this pivotal moment where the pursuit of truth regarding UAP, it transcends partisan politics, we are seeing, professional boundaries, national borders, and it makes the task of separating the signal from the noise that is credible evidence from unfounded rumor or speculation, what have you, more important than ever before. Which is why I'm very, very glad to be talking about this new development. Are you surprised that we're having something new to talk about? I'm sure you are not. And it is about this very fascinating video from the channel of Jesse Michels, who does so much excellent work in this space. He recently, just the other day, put out this video featuring the late Harald Malmgren, along with Harold's daughter Pippa, who's also a very impressive individual in her own right. Harald Malmgren, this is him here speaking in the interview. He was exceptionally clear, razor sharp, I thought, talking about some amazing, amazing things. This is Jesse and Pippa in the interview as well. I'm going to get into all of this. Harald Malmgren, though, first, you really need to know just how impressive this man's background was. He was born in 1935. He studied at Yale. He had the highest honors there in economics. Oxford took him next. He completed his doctoral work there under the guidance of a man who later won the Nobel Prize in economics. In fact, Harald Malmgren studied under a number of Nobel laureates in economics. He was 27 years old in 1962. He's recruited by the Kennedy White House, mainly, but he also joined a group called the Institute for Defense Analyses, very important think tank as well. But he's brought on by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara in 1962 as one of McNamara's so-called whiz kids. This is a big thing at the time. Malmgren was probably the most important of them all. It's because when Kennedy came to office, he knew some of the Nobel Prize winners and academicians who were blown away by Malmgren's talents. That's essentially what it was. So Malmgren becomes the joint liaison between the Joint Chiefs and the National Security Council, just as the Cuban Missile Crisis was beginning in 1962. And his role was crucial. Malmgren was deep into the Situation Room during this whole crisis, going back and forth with Curtis LeMay. You really want to hear Malmgren discussing this in his interview with Jesse Michels. It is very eye-opening, very, very enlightening. So he was actually very critically important in de-escalating that crisis to avoid World War III. After that, he had a very long career. He advised 4 presidents on matters of nuclear strategy, trade. He had many, many other very impressive achievements in his career. What's interesting here is that we've seen a struggle unfolding on Wikipedia over the article that manages or documents Harald Malmgren. And the article is facing potential deletion. This is a discussion that apparently is going on still as I record this video. This is a man who served Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. He provided counsel to the Senate Finance Committee. So the editor who is trying to remove him is questioning his importance. He's dismissing Malmgren's statements on extraterrestrial matters as, quote, wacky claims about marauding space aliens. Really diminishing this man's 40 years of service. You have to wonder about the timing of all of this. Malmgren had just died. He had made his final statements about UFOs. His page had existed without challenge since 2015. And so there's a lot of people talking about how suspicious this is. They are right to be suspicious. The Wikipedia editor who was going after him is named Chetsford. I don't know who this person is. It's all anonymous names. He is at the center of this. This is a guy who's made 41,000 edits on Wikipedia. He can delete pages. He can block users. He has a tremendous amount of power that he has cultivated over years. So the article remains, for now, the Wikipedia community is deliberating. The outcome, as far as I can see, is uncertain. You'll have some people saying this is just routine maintenance of an encyclopedia. Others are seeing the erasure of inconvenient realities and truths. The line between curation and censorship is always thin, always has been. But anyway, Malmgren has a great deal to say on this in this nearly 4-hour interview that he does with Jesse Michels. By the way, he was 89 years old, and if you watch him, which I strongly encourage you to do, I'll have a link below, you can see he is as sharp as a razor. Incredible intellect on this man. And the day after this interview, I understand, this is, I think, from Jesse, his health collapsed and he was hospitalized. Jesse Michels did speak to him again by phone. Malmgren wanted this information out. You can really see this. It's really quite remarkable. You know, sometimes an elderly person will say something and you wonder if they are in their right mind. Unfortunately, this can happen. Of course, we all know of examples, but you cannot say this about Harald Malmgren. You listen to him and you realize it is not possible. This is not a man who was suffering from any form of cognitive decline. This is a clearly brilliant man who remained incredibly cogent during the entire interview. It's really quite remarkable. So what did he say? Well, he said a lot. I'll start with the Bluegill triple prime incident, since that's really what I think is at the forefront of all of this. In the summer of 1962, so Malmgren arrives in Washington. He is immediately thrust into two extraordinary situations. So first, he participated in the Cuban Missile Crisis deliberations. And second, he received an assignment to manage cost assessments for a series of nuclear tests that were codenamed Operation Dominic. Two previous tests in this series had already failed. Malmgren's given a blanket Q clearance. He's getting access to all the nuclear secrets in this capacity. And his specific mission involved a unique X-ray based missile defense system that would use the nuclear explosion's energy to disable incoming missiles. I mean, just this high-level scientific expertise here. So on October 25th, 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the military is conducting Bluegill triple prime at the Johnston Atoll. This is in the Marshall Islands in the Pacific. And this involved launching an Atlas missile carrying a nuclear warhead. So the missile reached its designated altitude and detonated successfully. By the way, I found this interesting because what I'm about to describe here, this is all from Malmgren, is much more detail than what I had learned many years ago from a direct witness of the event, a man that I interviewed named David Noble Whitecrow, who served aboard one of the vessels involved in all of this. It was the USS Finch. And as an aside, I'll just quickly add here that for a number of years, I didn't realize that Bluegill triple prime was a subset of Operation Dominic. I just always refer to this as Operation Dominic. But in fact, Bluegill triple prime was a subset, actually, of Operation Fishbowl, which itself was a subset of the larger Operation Dominic program. That's just for those of you keeping score. By the way, I was very gratified to see Jesse showed a brief clip of a program that I did with my wife Tracy a couple of years ago on this very topic. We discussed this at length. So anyway, during the test, an unidentified flying object, a UFO, appeared alongside the missile. I'll only add one other thing here that I learned from David in my interview with him years ago, which was that he said during the series of tests that were going on at this time, bogeys appeared regularly during the tests, and he said they would normally disappear just before detonation. So this was not a new thing. So with that said, during this test, this is October 25th, you have another bogey appearing alongside the missile. The military personnel refer to this object as a tag-along. That's a term used very matter-of-factly, suggesting this was, again, not an unprecedented occurrence, just as my witness David had said years ago. So according to the reports Malmgren received, this object was positioned within or near the explosion's fireball. So the nuclear detonation gives off a very powerful electromagnetic pulse that appeared to destabilize the object's flight systems. The object, now disabled, tumbles out of the nuclear fireball. It falls into the Pacific Ocean. You have Navy vessels in the vicinity immediately mobilized for recovery operations. During the clip where Jesse is interviewing Malmgren, he discussed the testimony of David Noble White Crow, who talked a little bit about this and just stated it was at 9:59 a.m. The missile launched. Shortly after that, the ship's captain ordered all non-essential person below deck. White Crow was brought above, along with a few other sailors, to witness what he saw was a huge cigar-shaped object approaching at about 10 degrees above the horizon. And there was an emergency response to this whole UFO recovery that was ongoing. Now, one thing that I did not know, which was discussed here, is the official video recordings or film recordings of the test were sanitized, at least in part. A large white triangle was superimposed over the portion showing the UFO tumbling from the explosion. And this segment remains classified to this day, so that makes Bluegill Triple Prime the only Operation Fishbowl nuclear test with permanently redacted footage. All very, very interesting here. So when Malmgren received reports about the test, he noticed mentions of this tag-along object. So he asks questions, and he's told matter-of-factly, yeah, tag-along, with no further explanation offered. So he presses for more information, but he was initially blocked with the classic need-to-know excuse, despite his Q clearance. So he continues to press for details about what had occurred. Eventually, he was directed to travel to Los Alamos National Laboratory for a special briefing. There, he describes Lawrence Preston Gies, who was the director of the Albuquerque division of the Atomic Energy Commission, who met with him. And just for the record, Gies was also the grandfather of Jeffrey Bezos, the owner of Amazon. Yeah. So Gies produces recovered material from the downed object. He shows Malmgren material that had fallen from what they call the tag-along, this object, and he allows Malmgren to physically handle this material. During the interview, Jesse's asking about the physical sensation of handling this material, and Malmgren says it felt weird because it didn't feel like anything. There was no typical tactile feedback you would expect when handling an object. He said when he was handling the pieces, they seemed, it wasn't hot or cold. He almost had no feeling when he described this. But he said he seemed to telepathically receive a communication from the object. Seems crazy, but I will just tell you, in my own research, this is not the first time I have heard such a thing. Just saying. So he heard words in his head, although he later could not recall the exact content. He felt these communications were important, though. He believed the material may have implanted ideas directly into his subconscious. That's just what he said. So Gies apparently is considering this all as a test because he wanted to see if Malmgren would experience this mental reaction to the material. Apparently Malmgren passed this test. So after this experience, Malmgren was deemed ready for further information. He subsequently received a full briefing on what were called other world technologies from Richard Bissell, who had been deputy director of plans for the CIA, and he had been involved in designing Area 51, for the record. So this whole incident marks Malmgren's transition from his role of just analyzing missile costs and whatnot to becoming privy to very classified information about UAP or UFO-related technologies. There's very little physical description of the pieces that Malmgren handled. The only descriptive detail that I caught was about when he was asked about their color, and he said they were the color of something in space, which is a little bit vague, but suggests maybe dark or a black color. There wasn't any information about the shape or size or any other the physical characteristics of these pieces. He did describe how they felt when he was handling them, saying it was like, it felt weird, he said, because it didn't feel like anything. But that really is about all that you had. There were no other details about that, unfortunately. About 2 weeks after Malmgren's briefing, however, President Kennedy and Vice President Johnson, along with their staffs, traveled directly to Los Alamos. According to Malmgren, they were primarily interested in learning about this tag-along UFO, not about the missile test. They were interested in the UFO. So again, we're seeing evidence of very high-level government interest in actively monitoring this phenomenon. This is Richard Bissell, by the way. Months later, apparently, Bissell told Malmgren, gave him a comprehensive briefing on all of these other world technologies. He said that incidents like Bluegill Triple Prime had been occurring for decades. And he specifically mentioned earlier UFO crash retrievals, including one in Magenta, Lombardy, Italy in 1933. Bissell said that UFOs were particularly attracted to what he called tip-of-the-spear technology developments, especially nuclear tests. He revealed that a pattern had emerged where these objects would appear during atomic detonations, again suggesting surveillance or maybe intervention. Malmgren talked a little bit about General Curtis LeMay in this, particularly during the Cuban Missile Crisis segment of the interview, which is fascinating, but also just indicating that LeMay, who was an extremely high-level Chief of Staff of the Air Force, he ran Strategic Air Command, he was a very, very strong, aggressive general in the U.S. Air Force. LeMay was also aware of these developments, according to Malmgren. Although compartmentalized security kept most of these officials in the dark. One of the things that comes up in this is a discussion of the Knights of Malta, connected to the Vatican, and they, according to Malmgren, played a very important role in managing information about these retrievals, especially the Magenta Italian incident from 1933. I'm going to get to that in just a second. So, in fact, before I do that, though, I just want to mention here that this connection with President Kennedy and his interest or knowledge of the UFO or UAP subject, that according to Malmgren, even Kennedy, despite his high office, he's president, encountered resistance when he tried to access complete UFO files, particularly when he proposed cooperation with the Soviets on this issue. And this was a stance that Malmgren suggested may have contributed to the tensions leading to his assassination. You know, I discussed a lot of this at some length just recently in an interview with Philip Lavelle, who is a genuine expert on the JFK assassination. We had a lot to say about this. I did a 7-part series with Philip several years ago, which I would always encourage people to check out. But just recently, we had a session on JFK and UFOs, where Philip pointed out that JFK researchers to this day will absolutely avoid the UFO connection. They will not go there. This is a forbidden subject, apparently. It's unfortunate. They just will not go there. But now we have Malmgren also supporting this idea that the connection between UFOs and JFK's assassination is a significant aspect of hidden history. And in fact, he was asked explicitly if UFOs played any role in JFK's death, and Malmgren gave a very careful response. I thought he said JFK fully knew all about UFOs long before he became president, due to his background in naval intelligence. And he specifically mentioned that Kennedy had been fully briefed by Forrestal, that is James Forrestal, who was the first Secretary of Defense, who died under very suspicious circumstances. I would say that Forrestal was murdered. I've believed this for many, many years. And in fact, when Malmgren was asked if Forrestal's death had anything to do with UFOs, he said probably, but he would not speculate any further. Regarding Kennedy's assassination, Malmgren indicated that the correspondence between JFK and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev included discussions of unidentified flying objects, that's his words, and the prospect of collaboration between the two nations on this whole matter. And he suggested, this is Malmgren, that JFK saw UFOs as a potential avenue to make world peace between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. He wasn't directly claiming that UFOs were the cause of Kennedy's death, but he did convey that Kennedy's interest in collaborating with the Soviets on this matter was among the things that he and Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, or former head of the CIA, were fighting about. So it really does suggest that Kennedy's desire for openness and cooperation on UFOs created tension with elements in the intelligence community, particularly after Kennedy fired Dulles as CIA director and threatened to scatter the CIA to the winds. Famous quote from Kennedy. So Malmgren also was reminded about the letter from JFK to the acting CIA director, John McCone, requesting coordinating UFO data with NASA to better collaborate with the Russians. This is November 12, 1963, is 10 days before his assassination. And Malmgren said he was aware of the document. He added that Kennedy had sent various communications about UFOs or UAP that he said he formed the basis in why we stopped talking to each other, meaning Kennedy and the intelligence community. This caused a huge rift between Kennedy and the intelligence community, or at least added to it, according to Malmgren. Now, the Knights of Malta connection is really interesting, and the Magenta UFO retrieval. I'll just talk a little bit about this because Harald Malmgren had a bit to say about this, and it's really quite interesting. So there's Magenta, it's in northern Italy. The connection between the Knights of Malta and UFO crash retrievals. This is another very significant but I would almost say unexplored aspect of UFO history. So Malmgren learned about this from Bissell. I mentioned this before, Richard Bissell, Deputy Director of Plans for the CIA. What it looks like here is that after a disc-like object came down near Magenta in 1933, the Italian government moved it to a secure airbase in Italy for the rest of the duration of Mussolini's regime, which was right toward the end of World War II. So, and there was the special investigative body called Gabinetto, or RS-33, to study the craft. Now, the Vatican's role comes out through Pope Pius XII, who was Pope at the time, and according to what Malmgren had said, he was concerned, as Pope, about the technology falling into the hands of the Nazis, because Italy was allied with Germany. So the Pope back-channeled, that's Malmgren's word here, crucial information about this disc to the Americans. So the Pope told the Americans what the Italians had, and Malmgren says, and we ended up scooping it toward the end of the war. So the intervention of the Vatican was quite decisive in the ultimate disposition of the craft, according to Harald Malmgren. Allen Dulles, future director of the CIA, was operating in Switzerland at the time. part of the OSS. That's the precursor to the CIA. And according to Malmgren, Alan Dulles helped with the crash retrieval, or helped with the, I think, retrieval of the object, not with the crash retrieval, but in the 1940s. So, and then by the end of World War II, the Americans had somehow transferred this to Wright Airfield, later known as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, for further study, where it joined other recovered materials for analysis. So it's very, very interesting. It's a new twist to the story. People can say, where's the proof? Well, we've at least got the testimony of Harald Malmgren. The Knights of Malta connection is very interesting here. You have certain key intelligence figures. Hugh Angleton and his son James Jesus Angleton. Jesus Angleton was a very, very incredibly important CIA counterintelligence figure for decades. Both of them were members of the Knights of Malta. So Malmgren is asked about the role of this group, and he just says, specifically, I don't know, but they have a long historical connection to the Vatican. So what is the Knights of Malta? There's a picture of some members. They look like nice young men. They're not up to anything nefarious, I'm sure. Well, the Knights of Malta was established in the 11th century in Jerusalem during the First Crusade. So there's that. They evolved into a very powerful military and naval force defending Christianity during the Crusades. They're fighting with the Ottoman Turks centuries later. They were significant for many, many hundreds of years, repelling invasions. They were the defenders, or one of the defenders of Christendom during the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance. They were kicked out of Malta by Napoleon in just before the year 1800. They settled in Rome, where they continue to this day as a sovereign entity. They are a sovereign entity. Officially, they're all focused on humanitarian and medical work around the world. Their actual name is the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, SMOM. So they are a non-territorial sovereign entity. They are recognized under international law. They have diplomatic relations with over 100 nations. They have their headquarters in Rome. They don't have any sovereign land, but they can issue passports. They can mint coins. They maintain diplomatic immunity. They function very much like a state in international affairs, but they are a Catholic religious order at the same time, and they therefore operate under the Pope's spiritual authority, but they govern their secular matters independently. So that's the Knights of Malta. They're a very unique organization, very elite membership. There are many Americans. I think their membership is something like 14,000 we can say citizens, I guess we can say. I think about 3,000 of them are Americans, a lot of Europeans. Americans, especially Americans in the intelligence field, have been deeply embedded in the Knights of Malta. William Donovan, head of the OSS during World War II. Alan Dulles seems to have been a member. John McCone, a future CIA director, was a member. There is talk that they helped the Nazis escape out of Germany at the end of World War II. I think that's got to be true. They were very involved in supporting all kinds of anti-communist activities during the Cold War. And they're still active. They're still around. And you have to assume there is a lot of room for all kinds of shenanigans and covert operations that they are involved in. And they certainly are connected to the UFO subject. In fact, one of the members of the Knights of Malta was Colonel Philip J. Corso, later famous for his claims about reverse engineering, alien materials. He was a key figure in Operation Paperclip, which was involved in bringing Nazis secretly out of Germany to the United States for scientific and intelligence work. So yeah, Corso was involved in all of that. He was a Knight of Malta. So you've got a lot of these UFO types of connections. William Casey, Ronald Reagan's CIA director, was a Knight of Malta. Many, many others. So what Harald Malmgren was saying about all this is that you've got this very intricate relationship between this sovereign religious order, intelligence agencies, and the handling of, let us call it, non-conventional technology. So He didn't really elaborate on all of the details that one would have liked, but he really makes it very clear that there is a lot for us to explore in this connection. It seems very, very important to me. A few other things. There's so much more to discuss. I can't go over all of it here, but these are some of Harald Malmgren's tweets toward the very end of his life in 2024, 2025, where he had a lot to say about UFOs or UAP. He was right on top of using current designation of UAP and just putting it all out there. You can really see that by the end of his life, he decided this is coming out. And he was, again, I must stress, crystal clear in his presentation of the information with Jesse. So it was really quite extraordinary. What I would like to wrap up saying relating to Harald Malmgren here is he's really talking also about a shadow apparatus, this transnational control and knowledge fragmentation of UAP around the world. And really what you get with him is that there's the powers that are governing UAP secrecy are transcending national boundaries. They operate in a realm where elected officials are simply temporary custodians. They're not masters of anything. This isn't his conjecture. This is the testimony from a man who dwelled within the highest echelons of American governance, which he did. When he was directly questioned about the existence of a deeper layer of control that goes beyond national borders, he had one word: yes. It was unequivocal. This transnational apparatus manifests through a variety of different instruments. There exists what he called the majestic. So this is the elite coalition of military commanders, intelligence officers, and scientific minds who have appointed themselves guardians of these secrets. And they are the bulwark against disclosure. They believe themselves to be the protectors of mankind from truths that are too destabilizing for common citizens like you and me. The Knights of Malta appears throughout this interview with a lot of frequency. So that this order, diplomatic status, deep Vatican connections, they are a node in this international network. I mean, the membership really reads like a roster of UFO management. Hugh Angleton, James Jesus Angleton, Philip Corso, General MacArthur and his staff, Bill Donovan, Alan Dulles, John McCone, William Casey. This doesn't seem like a coincidental pattern here. And then between the Vatican, American intelligence, and certain privileged aerospace contractors, you've got this kind of triumvirate of power. And Malmgren witnessed this firsthand. The Italian government, the Vatican, American agencies, all of these intricate channels of communication regarding crashed objects, like the 1933 Magenta retrieval. All of it very interesting. So you have this apparatus that ensures its survival through calculated fragmentation of knowledge. It's like even Malmgren, he had all of the so-called Q clearances. As he said, he's advising 4 American presidents. He encountered impenetrable barriers in this. Naval intelligence denied him certain information despite his comprehensive access. He says that's Navy intelligence. They live in their own world. He says sometimes they think they're even more powerful than we are, speaking of like the White House. So all of this compartmentalization is not accidental. It is systematic. Over-compartmentalization and Cold War secrecy really became the standard operating procedure. And as he put it in his interview, the left hand's not talking to the right. So knowledge is deliberately fractured. It is distributed across agencies and private contractors and international entities. So this will ensure that no single person or institution has the complete picture. This is really the sense that you get from hearing this man. The use of aerospace contractors serves a very specific purpose, and this shields operators from Freedom of Information Act requests and congressional oversight. Creates what he called, Malmgren here, plausible deniability, the ability of officials to truthfully claim ignorance of programs that are beyond their purview. So I think, what you get is that this management of the UFO reality and technology, or UAP reality, this doesn't reflect chaos, as some people will say, like, these people don't know what they're doing. No, opposite. It reflects order. It reflects a transnational order operating according to its own imperatives, beyond the reach of standard government that we're, always taught in school. This is how government's supposed to work. No, it does not work like that. These people don't answer to election cycles. They don't answer to public opinion. They answer to themselves, to their perception of necessary secrecy. They answer to principles that were established long before the modern state system even emerged. Looking at the Knights of Malta. So this is the reality that Malmgren witnessed. This is the world that exists beyond the world that we are permitted to see. So I encourage you to check out the excellent interview of Harald Malmgren, along with his very impressive daughter Pippa, with Jesse Michels on Jesse's channel. I'll have a link below. That's all I have for you. I hope you found this informative. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it. Also subscribe to my channel. Check out my website at richarddolanmembers.com. And thanks for being here with me. I will be back soon. Bye for now.